is on the phone, right?
Yeah, you're on my iPad.
Okay, great. And Eric, with a K, is in Providence. So I'm Mike, for those that are new, hello. Mike Keyes, I work at SMMA in Cambridge. I'm one of the co-chairs, and Eric Sanford, who works at Dimeo Construction in Providence, he's the other co-chair. And what we've been doing this year, just as a quick summary, is that we introduced, what are we calling it, the BSABIM 3.0, which is essentially the third iteration of changing this venue to do something a little different. So the first 1.0 was having just more lecture circuit. People would come and share what they want hard on people. People would listen and clap. And then 2.0 was the presentation would be a lot shorter. We would just get introducing a subject matter and then having the round table, if you will, the people that are here just sharing their own thoughts and becoming a broader conversation. And then pretty much expanding the minds of those that are here, and then when they leave, it kind of disappeared as a group. So the 3.0 was to get us together as a group, not only in these monthly meetings, but also offline, so we can form subgroups and produce some kind of deliverable, so we can kind of give back to the industry. And as we're finding already in, what is this, week 3 now, or month 3 of our new year, it's a struggle. It's difficult because we're all busy and we're all just volunteering our time. And the very first kickoff meeting when we came up with ideas, we brainstormed about 12 different ideas we want to tackle for the year. We edited and maybe collapsed a few different ideas into 3 main ideas. So we thought that was a more achievable target for the year. Then we have a schedule that hits upon all those 3, so we can check on progress throughout the year, help each other out, and that's the basic idea behind this effort this year. So to help that effort, we invited our friends Chris Weeks and Dave Brownell from the BIMCouncil. They're down in Connecticut, where they meet monthly as well, and they'll tell you a lot more about their own adventure. But we're asking them today to not only show us a deliverable, which I think is essentially a BIM workflow for different types of project types.
Doing today? You got
that what we're doing?
It is? Okay.
Okay, hopefully top secret information. So we're recording this. Oh, by the way, are we recording this, Eric? Or do we have to record on our side?
Nope, I'm recording.
Okay, terrific. All right, so what we're going to do is talk about the actual content, the subject matter that they're going to bring to us. But more importantly, maybe, or equally as important, is the process, so we can learn from them to see, how they put teams together, how they divided tasks up, how they kept managing the project teams to get some things done, because that's what we're hoping to do, is get 3 things done by the end of the year. So I'll try to facilitate as best I can to not only have us learn about the subject matter, but I'll try to infuse questions or get questions from you all about the process, so we can kind of leave here not only smarter but energized to help our project teams. So without anything more, who's going to take it?
Yeah, David will lead the way. And thank you, because actually I'm going to start off with a question, I think, to kind of understand the folks that are here today. So obviously, if you're in your iteration of 3.0 and you're kind of working toward a deliverable, just asking everybody in the room, what excites you about that? Why are you here? Why is that important to you? And I'm going to give you a correlation to that of what we see with our council. I'll give you some history. So I know Dan has quite a background, but why is that important to you to see some kind of a deliverable and workflow from this group?
Dan, it's a good idea to go around the table.
And go around the room. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm Dan Gallivan. I'm the IT director at Payette. Actually, one of the things, besides the locale being too easy for me to get here, the big thing I like about this particular group is, one, to continue my involvement and connection with building modeling and where we're going. One of the things that sort of energized, I think, the great idea of 3.0 was the idea of deliverables. Rather than just having, sort of a product come in, speak to us, that it gave this group a little bit more meaning to try to promote and educate on the use of BIM in the marketplace, but to some of the upcoming students. We also deal with a lot of the same projects and therefore a lot of the same clients in this marketplace. And what we, I think, often find is that our clients have a different idea sometimes of what BIM is going to mean to them. and sometimes maybe looking at what are the different solutions to help educate and train our clients and what they can potentially do with their building models in the future. So that's one of the big things sort of energized me for BIM 3.0.
That's great. Awesome.
My name is Doug Magners with Scanture, 3D laser scanning, and I'm actually new to the group, but I came more for the learning, but am excited by the subcommittee that is focusing on outreach and educating, because my experience has been a lot of people come out of school and just learn on the fly, floundering. And so while I'm trying to learn, I'm also excited to help others.
That's great.
I'm Sally Oostdorf. I am the BIM BDC lead at Kinman Design here in Boston, and I'm also new, so this is kind of my first iteration being at BSABIM. But I'm very excited about getting what we do here and sort of, you know, out of our larger audience. You know, the Boston design community faces a lot of the same challenges with respect to BIM. And I think it'd be great to be able to learn from each other and kind of, you know, utilize all of our knowledge and past experiences to really help push all of us forward. That's fine.
Awesome.
I'm Tom Ellis. I'm with Erie. I'm also the chair of the Innovative Practices Committee for the CMAA. So I'm here kind of with a couple different hats. The CMAA New England chapter has started to form a closer alliance with the BSA. I'm also a BSA member, but has not. I'm an architect, but I'm in the project management realm. So what I'm trying to do is become a little bit more educated about what's going on in the marketplace in Boston. Look at opportunities where, kind of like you had mentioned, working with owners, trying to understand how, you know, the whole BIM concept and process can be used at the end of the process for the owner's benefit as well. So understanding how it is used both in design and construction, but also in facilities management. So I'm here with a couple hats on and just trying to get more engaged and get involved in what's going on within the marketplace in Boston.
And you should know that you've got a few people in the room and also on the phone that are part of the CMAA Emerging Technology Committee. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But great to have you.
Right.
Why are you here?
I'm Peter Botello, because Eric couldn't make it. I work with Eric at the BC Project Manager. And in regards to the 3.0, I think what's intriguing is the application part of it. We actually get almost like workshop or hands-on type approach, which is intriguing. It's much different than the majority of groups involved in this round. It's really more of just educational, which is also important, but I think the application of using some creative, trying some creative methods, use of models.
Council in Southern New England, so that goes back and forth. So he can. Go ahead.
Bill Spalding from Berkmeyer. I'm Manager of Education Training. Some of what Dan said and mostly what Sally said. So really strong on the education, learning, sharing. BIM 1.0 was really exciting because we were all trying to figure it out. BIM 2.0 got a little stale. It was just like, okay, what's this? So I'm really excited about the 3.0 side because of the smaller groups, which I know we have a lot of deliverables and everybody has work on their plate, but I think together if we set some good deadlines, we'll be able to meet them. So I think the biggest challenge for me is to be able to commit the time to get this done. Really focusing on how content is created and shared and used is really what I want to dive deeper into and look at drawing standards, a little bit about how are we producing these drawings. It totally sucks that we share everything in 3D conceptually with our team, with everybody, then we hand off these crappy 2D drawings to contractors and expect them to build it. So it just bothers me forever. So I really want to try to push some type of 3D images into our CD set and hopefully into our permit sets. But yeah, that's where I am.
And just so I could ask another question because the word education came up. So I heard a little bit of external communication to the community and to certainly the owners. But how do you all feel about internal, education and where you think you are with your firms today? And is that that's a constant discussion too, right? So obviously we're talking about both sides of that conversation, right? Internal and external. Probably a little more on the external is what you're first saying, but you also have the internal. So, okay. Go ahead. Get rested. We'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Well, my name is Nicky Byers. I'm the New England Sales Director for Graphisoft. A lot of clientele in the area that can't make it. So I'm here as a person that's here to aggregate information, be that connection to the outside world, the general people that can't make it to this meeting. I'm also a BSA member, co with Vincent here, and we run the ArchiCAD user group. So being involved in the BSA atmosphere, being involved with everybody that's working in BIM right now is a priority of mine. So I'm here to learn, I'm here to introduce, and I'm here to make connections with not only yourself, but you make connections with outside entities also. Okay. Who did you say you worked with? Graphisoft?
Graphisoft. Great.
I am Vincent Buto. I am the BIM consultant for the Northeast for Graphisoft. Newly hired about a month. Before that, I was an architect at Danisco Design, and before that, Levi Wong, and before that, Anshin and Allen. And I've been using ArchiCAD since 2004, focused on BIM and workflows and implementation and exchange and whatnot. So I'm just here to learn, share my knowledge, and get better at what we do, because we like to build buildings that are efficient, and workflow is always important. So
Great. Well, yeah, we're presenting, but Chris Weeks.
I'll say something quick. My name is Chris Weeks. I'm an architect with the SLAM Collaborative. And one of the things, I don't know what iteration you would say our group is on, 2 or 3? 3. As well. So these BIMCouncils kind of get recycled every year or two. But one of the things, just the one thing that excites me is building a community where we all learn from each other and we can all develop best practices that we can share, because there is no clear-cut way of how to do this stuff, so we really need to lean on each other. And use the word collaborate, it's kind of overused. I'd say that's kind of the word of the decade, but it's definitely applicable, and I'd like us to take those steps to really truly becoming more collaborative instead of just talking about it.
Let's create a new word.
Yeah, let's do that. I don't know what.
Okay.
Collabo something.
And we're just doing introductions, and what kind of brought you here to the BIM 3.0? So.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'm sorry I'm late.
It's okay.
I actually live like 10 minutes away, and I decided to take an Uber instead of walking. It was smart choice. My name is Paulina. I work for a company called Advance 2000. We're an IT company, and we mostly work with firms in the AEC industry with a product that's called real-time rapid collaboration. And I mostly work with BIM and CAD managers. So I'm here to basically understand what are the challenges of a BIM manager when it comes to collaborating in real time with other firms or even in teams within their company.
Okay, a lot.
Yeah, I do.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And this, David, I could just mention that the 3 things that we are focused on for the year. We have 3 teams, and I was looking at our notes on our Google group. Is anybody who's been to the Google group site? Okay, just a few of us. So it's a good resource, and if you have trouble getting there, just email me or Eric, and either one of us can get you connected. Actually, we connect. If we go to the site and connect, or Eric, you have to send out an email.
Yeah, can you send that to me?
Okay, so just email.
Eric
I bet. It's not, if you could just advance that for me, that'd be great. Yes.
So, so the 3 things that we're focused on for the year, I sort of have 4. So help me out if I think we put 2 together. One was looking to put a model together, an integrated discipline model for Wentworth Institute of Technology, and I think that's combined.
Report on that before we jump into this.
Yeah, report would be good. Now, is that part of the skills workshop education outreach that Sally is leading?
That is going to be part of that.
Yeah.
We started, I think we started as probably one of the first opportunities that we could use as part of that outreach.
Yeah.
We're about 90% complete. So the idea came from Andy Duchesne from Consigli, who's been here to the meetings, and He's had a contact at Wentworth, one of the professors, and it basically came about that a lot of the students have not seen, for a large part, Revit or BIM in action. So as part of this, he really wanted to show them hands-on what are the tools that we're using. So it worked out well that with Andy and Consigli that we're currently doing at Payette, we're doing a project with them at Williams College out in Western Mass. So we saw this as an opportunity, saying, I've got the architecture side, he's got the construction side. Why don't we scrub our models a bit to sort of give them a sort of a generic feel and then hand these over. So we've gone through that process, and one of Andy's BIM managers, Alicia Cox, on the 5th of April is going to be presenting to 5 different classes at Wentworth of their construction management students, and is going to show them how to take our models, put them into Navisworks, and do basically that clash and collision detection. So that is, I would say, you know, we're about 90% with the big event happening on the 5th of April. So just about to get our first score for the year.
And you said Elizabeth Cox should be?
Alicia Cox.
Elizabeth worked with you, but Alicia is.
Yes, correct.
And would it be possible for others to be part of that class?
I don't know the sort of the what's happening around the specific technical requirements of that class, how big the classrooms are. Knowing that there's 5 through that day, I imagine it's probably like, my quick guess is about 25 students, maybe max per class, and that sort of classroom. If it's something that we could either record the event or WebEx, maybe actually have the event broadcast. That might be an opportunity to actually do a recording of it that way.
Okay. Well, let's do some brainstorming offline.
Yeah.
That sounds great. 90% is a good percentage.
Or even an opportunity to maybe, if we can, either record or broadcast it, or at least blog about the event. Maybe that's an opportunity for us to get some first.
So what you should learn from that opportunity is don't make the mistake of assuming that design and construction management curriculum is focusing on a variety of tools that people in this room are using today. We'd like to think that they are in 2017, but the reality that's not necessarily part of the curriculum. So that's a great opportunity because obviously as you get them out through that curriculum into the real world, as employers, you're going to like that because you're going to have less of a curve, right, to get them onboarded, and that's kind of the goal. But if you were to research, go follow like Design Intelligence and look at the major design schools, and then you grade that according to, you know, what you think they have for a curriculum. That'd be a good exercise, and maybe there's others even in this market that might be able to play off of that from what you're doing here at the BSA. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
That was one of the actual hopes that is maybe doing this as a first step with Wentworth. It might be a future BAC student, MIT, Harvard, and there's other architecture programs that we can play off in the future, or even down the high school level, knowing that the BSA does a lot of high school outreach. Maybe just and one of the big things we're trying to stress here is that everyone comes into BIM with different ideas. Mm-hmm. We as the architects, you know, design, we're not often doing BIM for construction. It's often for design intent. So we're not going to model everything. Contractor comes out with a different approach. He wants, you know, takeoffs, quantities, material, staging. So there's so much more that they've, you know, now doing with BIM and trying to model so much more than we are. And likewise, the engineers are often, you know, come at it with entirely different. And right now, we're still not too sure what the owners are looking at when they get all these final models into place.
So speaking of that, you intending to go to the BIM forum?
I'm not intending to go to the BIM forum this year.
Anybody planning to go?
So,
yeah.
What is the spring? Is
it next week?
The subject is what owners want.
Right. They don't know what they want.
Well, yeah,
Peter will be happy to present everything.
It's a half a day.
Well, Eric and I are doing a synod speaking opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll share.
And you mentioned you'll be recording or possibly some type.
That's what we want to find out.
If it can be captured in some way, we can relay that and pull it together for ABX. That would be a nice thing to run on a screen during ABX in that little hangout space that the BSA developed last year.
Yeah, that's true.
We've been looking for stuff like that.
And I could tell the BIMCouncil would just love to review what goes through the curriculum because we might be able to also utilize that in some of our future discussion as well. So it'd be great if it can be shared, if possible.
Excellent, great update. So the second group is the BIM content resource / reinventing drawing conventions group. And Brian Erickson, who's not here, and not on the phone, right? Brian, you there? No? Okay, is leading the group, and then Bill Spaulding kind of leading the group within the group. we have a lot of this matching up with things.
We do. It's a big topic, so we thought breaking it into two would be great. We are at 0%.
0%?
So,
Really noted?
just let you know. We're waiting to see.
You could only go up?
The content's always going. I had mentioned before, we are in 3-4 months now of a new content browser called Avail, and it's been really helpful for us to share content between internal teams. We haven't gone external with it yet, or cloud-based. We are one office just across the channel, so we haven't had need. But we are finding it to be awesome and great support from the company. This is ArchVision, by the way. If you've seen the content from ArchVision for all the entourage, they released in the fall last year, Avail, and we've been on top of that as our content browser. So that's what we're doing now. So we're looking at taxonomy right now in the office and how everything is named. So I can bring that experience to the group and see where that goes. And we've all as a group, so I guess we're 2% into it. We as a group, we're sticking with like a CSI format. So everything is prefixed with 08 for doors and windows and 12 for, so we're staying in that realm. That way we reinforce it to our design staff as well.
And this group, and so Bill's part of a group of 6, and Sally and Dan are part of a group of 7. And these are not closed groups, so those of you who are new, those who have friends that might be interested, then this group can ever expand. So it's not meant to be closed, but we do want to get progress too. We can talk about some of those. Third group is called the AECO, O for owners, collaboration / the deployment / closing the loop. So the whole kind of BIM implementation plan, how do we go full circle with FM, that's all mashed together. So you see, we had a hard time really editing the 12, we just put them all together and called them 3. And that group is really close to 8 people, and unfortunately Kevin Horn, who was leading, isn't able to lead anymore. He's got some family commitments, so he has thrown in that leadership hat for whoever wants to pick it up.
That's a lame excuse.
Jill is just joking.
I'm just joking.
For the record.
I just want to make a comment because it just came up. If people are taking a lot of notes, if you go to the BSABIMRoundtable on LinkedIn, you'll find a beautiful set of notes produced by Eric that list everything Mike's talking about with all the people and all. So
my cheat sheet. Yeah,
that's been my cheat sheet.
Excellent. So it's working.
Yes.
And there'll be a new one for today. So.
Awesome. All right. Progress.
Yes, they've been right.
And maybe we can put this recording somehow on that, have that accessible too as a link on the Google Group site. We'll try. Great. So this group, without hearing from Kevin, I'm not sure what kind of progress we have there either. I'll assume 0 unless somebody else in that group has any status update. No.
I'll go with 0% on that.
You get in all groups.
Okay. So is there anyone in this room that's interested in that topic that would like to lead and take out that leadership today, or we could just put it out to the entire group and see who's interested in picking that up? Okay, there's no resounding.
Everybody's racing on the LinkedIn right now.
Well, also correct in saying that this is the last deliverable.
Yeah, this is certainly the biggest one.
The order that we're discussing them is in the order of when they're due. So the deliverable for April for the coordination with Wentworth is due, and then ours is due, I think, late summer. Then the other one was due after ABX, if I remember right. Or we're trying to get them all done before ABX.
I think we're shooting for that. We should, to your point of ABX, we should put some kind of placeholder in, so we can get a spot, maybe even a lecture.
Does everybody know what ABX is? Just want to make sure. It's the Greenfield Boston, and it's this year. It's in October, I believe. It's November. Is it November?
November 8th.
The Greenfield and ABX are the same week.
And to get a session, it's due this Friday for submittals.
Yeah.
Oh, this Friday?
This Friday.
So we'll put out a post on our LinkedIn group too, maybe just on LinkedIn in general, to if you have any other ideas for abstracts for ABX, do this Friday. So with that, there's nothing to report. So those are the 3 things we're focused on. And now back to our program already in progress.
Thank you. Yes, I heard a bunch of interesting things that are very, very similar to what we have kind of evolved to in southern New England. So you should first know that the BIM Council is part of the Construction Institute, which is part of the University of Hartford. It's a not-for-profit organization, and the Construction Institute, oops, timed out again on me. Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm hitting the wrong button.
Okay.
Sorry. It's pilot error. There we go. Okay. So our mission and vision is very simply, visionary leaders, skilled professionals, and we are always trying to focus on cross-industry collaboration. It fits very nicely into what the BIM Council has been trying to do. This is our mission, which we, regardless of geographical location and discipline, we're trying to bring resources together to our body. And very simply, we look at how we're going to leverage this not only in our own practice, but as a design and construction society. So it's something we've been working on for a while. Our planning group, as David Acoyne and myself are the co-chairs. And what you should notice, it's fairly diverse, which is set up on purpose. That we're looking across, and maybe someday we'll actually get an owner to help with the planning of what we do. But we're looking at design, construction, service providers, trade partners, so that we get a good conversation going. Founded in 2008, really started taking place 2009, and as we said, yeah, we're 3.0 or third generation. I kind of alluded to like that scene in one of the Matrix movies when Neo comes up to the architect. You've been here 5 times before. Well, that's kind of how we feel. Like we're on our 3rd time in front of the architect. But what it tells me is that we keep kind of changing, and I've been around since the beginning, and they've all been positive, but we now morphed into something that can really focus on working together and work on these deliverables, the same kind of things that you're talking about working on as well. The earlier versions, when BIM was really more of a discussion, we were all looking for the same answers. And we only had in Southern New England a certain populace that were really starting to work in Revit as a platform and looking at some of the deliverables outside of that. This is long before Navis worked, so obviously there wasn't a large general contractor population, even though we saw trade partners in piping and duct using their own systems. And it took a while before that really started to come together. But the kind of people that we had were at such a higher level, and the people that participated, the communication wasn't really getting down to the ones who were going to drive it, okay? And I mean no disrespect to management of firms, it's just the way that it was. So in our 3rd iteration now, and you look at that, the planning committee, except for me, I would say all the rest of them on there know pretty much everything that there is about the industry. They can do anything in modeling, Revit, Navis, all these other platforms, and that's what makes it work. We have an open discussion. There's like no secrets. People are coming to the meetings. We have great open conversation. We look at common problems, and we try to come up with deliverables. And the message I give, and I heard a little bit of this here, is that it's really a small community when you look at it. Obviously, Boston is a larger geographical location, but as far as design and construction, it's a small community, and at some point or another, you're all going to be working with one another on a project that you don't even know about in the future. And if you put forth your efforts now to work on collaboration, to work on platforms, to work on workflows that are going to be more efficient, and all the tools that are available today and we see are being flooded in the marketplace, you're going to be better off as a society, because that's just a natural evolution. So that's part of our focus as well. I hear those threads in the discussion here today as well. So fostering and mentoring relationships. As every BIM Council meeting, I say the same thing. And we try to have interaction with younger professionals. I can't say that we have too many design or construction management students that get involved, even though we would like them to. from time to time, a little bit here and there, but not that many. And what we try to do is we share, resources that we all have. Peter's going to, the BIM forum. We hope that, between he and Eric, they're going to come back and he'll be able to relay some information, just as Chris and I went to the BIM forum in Atlanta in October. And we all have local and national contacts that if we see something that we think is of importance, we'll get that presented to the group. Back in like 2009, I still recall having one of our earlier webcasts and having Kimona Numa on the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning for a breakfast, which was 5 o'clock in Pasadena. He was willing to get up and do that, and he did a little mini BIM storm for us. So we do those kind of things all the time. You'll see, though, as we look at, we meet every third Wednesday, and we alternate between a breakfast and what we call BIM and beer, where we meet at night, we bring in craft beer, and the breakfasts are more focused on, BIM overall and the methodology. The BIM and beer tend to go more toward a Revit user group discussion, but also hybrids into a BIM discussion as well. I'll get to that in a second. So here's the working topic. So what we do is we sit around as a planning group, and we also ask all the people that come, what are your interests? What do you need to hear about? Where are you having challenges? Where are you having success? And we put this together. This was put together probably October of last year, and we're going to be updating it because some of these things we've done. We've done BIM and prefabrication. Was our last meeting at F&F Mechanical in North Haven, Connecticut. Actually, the C4R is going to be the next one, which I'll get to, at Newman Architects in New Haven. So some of these things we've already done. We look at the changing contracts and how things are delivered. Level of accuracy. The process mapping is obviously what Chris is going to go through today. But we just try to pull our resources as a planning group, and I'm fortunate. You've got two great people here with Michael and Eric, but I'm fortunate because I got like 8, 9 people. So that's why I was asking a question. If you're passionate about something and you want to see positive changes, you got to be part of the discussion, number one. But you should try to find a way to volunteer your time. It sounds like many of you have done that, which is so very important. And just try to get other people engaged as well.
And Dave, with these things that are listed here, do you have deliverables for all of them, or?
No, that's one thing. I'm not sure what the next slide is. Maybe I'll go back. The work group that we have that is probably 10 people, thereabouts, probably meets physically every other month. And you'll see in some of the pictures of his presentation of how they put things together with, whiteboards and sticky notes and all that kind of stuff as far as going through the process. And then there was also internal communication through email, even though we did talk about some other technology pieces like, was it Audubon or I can't think of the name of the one. There's a couple other ones that we looked at as far as how to map things together and give people access to work on the workflow diagrams. But that's it. We just have one right now. We're probably going to move in, once this is done, generate a white paper and get that published, and then we're going to go into next discussion, which I think we're actually looking at contracts, was I think the next topic. So no, we're not quite as bold at having 3 going on at one time. I think, once again, geographically, you probably have access to more people being in Boston than we have in little old Connecticut. So that's probably part of it. So our next event, BIM and Beer, is at Newman Architects in New Haven. And just so you know, and some of you are aware, but just so in case you don't, we broadcast every meeting, our go-to meeting. So if you'd like to be part, make sure I get your information, or we can share it afterward. I'll put you into our database. Information will go out a day or two before. We'll send out the go-to meeting information. So even though you're up here, you're happy to join us at any time. Even though I haven't figured out virtual beer yet. So when we figure that out, maybe we'll be doing something.
You can do it lemonade now.
Virtual lemonade?
Yes.
Okay, can't wait to get that.
Sure.
So this, just to give you an idea, this discussion of this presentation started August 31st last year. You know why? I read an article in Autodesk blog, Line Shape, whatever it was at the time, now it's Redline, about how Newman was utilizing A360, but from a focus of collaborating with their partners, even though they're located in New Haven and Washington, D.C., they have design partners all over the country, right? And, you know, and no offense to like Advanced 2000, because you probably see some similarities, this is the direction that they went. They made a virtual choice to go with, you know, C4R or A360, and they've become very successful. I read that article. I know their principle. We're at a golf tournament. I said, you know something? This would be a great discussion. Would you share? Absolutely. But it took that long to get into the calendar. That's kind of how these things happen. So that will be on that date. I'm going to pass it over to Chris. Whoops. So if you have any questions, there you go. Okay? I'm going to shut up. Okay.
How are we doing for time? I don't think I need too much for time. Is it?
9:38.
Yeah. You guys go until 10:30?
Sure. All right, so I'm going to review, oh, hey, the old analog clock. Yeah. I'm going to review the process that we use that David alluded to. So I'll get into the deliverable at the end, but for now it's kind of more around the process of how we got there. So one of the analogy that I think of when I think of BIM is like a Lewis and Clark expedition. We've been given this task of going from one place to find the Pacific Ocean, but nobody's really given us an exact map of how to get there. And so far it's been a very technology-driven movement. So software and hardware companies are quick to give us all these tools. So like maybe Autodesk gives us a really good canoe. ArchiCAD maybe gives us a great wagon. Maybe Trimble or somebody like that gives us a nice food storage system. But they don't really care how it all goes together. And so we're kind of left, what's that?
No paddles.
No paddles, exactly. So we're kind of left to figure it out on our own. So I guess I've looked at this as the analogy of we're trying to find our way to the West Coast. And it's up to us to kind of figure out how the tools work. And we can't really rely completely on the, no offense to the wonderful people who make all the software tools, but we need to really find out what works best for us. And the best way to find that out is through groups like this, so people can try things and report back to the group about what works and what doesn't. I thought this was kind of an interesting picture too. Kind of like the design team in this canoe. Look at the contractors over here. And an owner up in this one looking and saying, I wonder what's going to happen now. I hope everybody gets along and plays nice together.
So this is the nice way of saying up shit's creek. Where's the client?
The owner's back there.
The owner's there.
Already won back.
He's wondering,
He's a referee.
what are these folks going to do to each other? You know, and I hope it's all good. So when our version of the BIMCouncil was reinvigorated or reintroduced at the beginning of last year, David Aucoin, who's on the phone, I think, he's the director at PES Engineers, and David Brownell, these two guys really kicked it off, and they've done a wonderful job and have really pushed us in the right direction. Because prior to that, like David said, we would have BIMCouncil meetings. Oftentimes a software vendor would come in and give a demonstration and all that, which was nice, but it didn't really help us overall in our day-to-day tasks. So the first thing that David did is he wanted to develop a inputs and outputs process mapping. I think it's an exercise he had done somewhere else, and we were trying to kind of recreate process mapping that had been done at like Georgia Tech for research purposes. So at our first meeting, and this is where the light really went off for me, it was nice because instead of like having a presentation, David kind of put out some topics, and there was a lot more discussion than there typically is, than we typically had in those kind of meetings to date. So he tasked us with kind of, depending on what our role was in the industry, whether you were a designer, contractor, owner, etc., you know, try to think of inputs for various stages of the project and what kind of outputs there would be.
We actually had 2 owners that were at that meeting that actually showed up from different areas of the state of Connecticut, which was interesting.
So I forget exactly which color is the input and the output on this one. That might be an input, like that one was a site input, and then I can't quite read some of the outputs. But say, for instance, if the owner is an RFP, the output of that would have been a selection of the design team, et cetera. So we came up with a lot of sticky notes that we then collated. Kind of, I guess, what did we do, Dave? We kind of grouped them together, and then we took photos of them, and then we developed our working group. So this is the first step of the process. So we figured as a working group, what we could do is get together, take all these inputs and outputs, develop a process map, and since the process map was generated from everybody in our region, everybody in the room worked in our area, so they were giving us information as to how they worked. So that's when we kind of morphed down into a smaller working group of about 8 to 10 people. And we started trying to make sense out of all of those sticky notes. And this is the first iteration on the whiteboard that we came up with, and it's kind of a mess.
And I think it was a standard design bid build deliverable.
Yeah, we were trying to think about like what kind of project would this apply to. You know, we were trying to make it broad to cover a lot of areas. And then what would a standard workflow be, and what would those inputs and outputs be. So we finally took all this information, and we came up with our first workflow chart, which is all this stuff here. So we did this in a kind of like a mapping software. It's called lucidchart.com. So that was a nice way to make a lot of this flow chart in this fashion. And then we did our first pass of it, and then we made copies of it, and at a subsequent meeting we handed it out to everybody and asked them to mark up, you know, like where does this, you know, what do you see that needs to be amended in this, or what could be improved or changed, you know, does this apply to how you work? So we got over a dozen people filled it out and gave us some great feedback from there. And one of the things we found out after this first iteration is that it definitely varies on project delivery method. So design bid build, this workflow chart looks a little different than CM at risk workflow, and then it looks quite a bit different from design build and also from IPD. So our final workflow chart, at least for design bid build, is this. And in the slide, it doesn't look that clear. I've got another PDF that I'll pull up at the end of this that we can look at, so it should be a little bit clearer. So, and this is a result of us, as David said, we get together in person probably every 2 or 3 months, review this, make changes to it. And what we really wanted to do is identify, you know, the greens are the inputs, the oranges are the outputs, those are your standard project deliverables. And then we kind of interspersed in there where all these model exchanges are occurring. So it actually, at the end of it, it's kind of a busy chart, but graphically, I think it's a great tool for us to show people, like, you know, how does the workflow happen? Where does BIM fall in that workflow? It was great for those of us, all of us involved, because it gave us insight into what other people are doing with the model. Like on the design side, we didn't have as much insight as to what was going on the contractor and the subcontractor side. So it's a really great opportunity to learn what those folks were doing with the models. And then it allowed us to kind of figure out where some of the strengths and the weaknesses are in these deliverables. So I guess I won't get into parsing what all that means, but just this was the first output for design bid build. We have others for CM at risk, and we're working on some for design build and IPD.
Chris,
yeah.
Chris, this is Eric. Is there some place where we can find this?
I haven't posted it yet, but I'll have to send it. I'll make it available to you here at some point soon.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
Because I appreciate how you just took one and you did it, right? So now that if you want to do these other delivery types, you can just learn from everything that you did through one map and then just alter it.
Correct.
right? Instead of saying, let's work on all of them at the same time
Yeah.
and kind of get in the way of each other.
Well, I think at the beginning, Mike, our intent was, let's do one workflow that covers everything.
Yeah.
And then subsequent discussions and seeing what was coming up, realizing to do. So I think that drove us to do multiple process maps based on delivery methods. So, yeah, I guess it kind of forced us to do it that way. And yeah, we're actually churning through and getting the stuff done. So the major takeaways from that whole process, one of the things we really wanted was all disciplines represented. I would say ownership is still kind of underrepresented at this point, but we had all aspects of design teams from architects through engineers and civil engineers. We had contractors and construction managers. We had subcontractors give us feedback. So the great thing was getting feedback from everybody, not just having somebody dictate, say, okay, this is how the process is. We actually, we wanted a real snapshot of how people are working now, and I think that's what we got. And as I said, it was really good to see, so like these next 2 points, we got a good snapshot of the current BIM workflow, and it provided a ton of insight and transparency through the whole process. Because one of the things we're trying to learn is like, okay, if we really want to collaborate, how are people downstream from the design teams using the models? And are there things we can do to facilitate better building projects doing that? And going into it, I think a lot of us weren't really sure. On the design side, we throw the models over the wall, and then the contractors get them on the other side, and they curse and generally do a lot of remodeling on their end to fit their purposes. So we're trying to uncover those inefficiencies to help just make the whole process from start to finish work a little better. And I think we found that out. But we're starting to find it out. From that, too, it gave us tons of presentation topics. And that coupled with the next point, where we did presentations by users, for users. I can't stress that enough. So based on that workflow, we were able to identify areas. We had a guy, for example, from a surveying and engineering firm who was really good with 3D scanning. So he came in and did a presentation on scanning. And the beauty of it was, like, by having an engineer do it who uses these tools every day versus having the Faro scanner guy come in and give a presentation, he was able to give us all sorts of great tips as to what scanners work best in certain situations. And even for us designers, like I might never do a 3D scan, but I'll use them. And he gave us a lot of great insight into how you can work with scanners to get a scan that works for you, as far as like how much fidelity do you need, how finely tuned resolution do you need color information or not. If it's an interior space, then try this scanner, which is faster but not necessarily as accurate. If you're doing long distances, you can say maybe you should try this other scanner. So that's the type of content that's gold for us, because we're getting feedback from somebody who uses the stuff every day, somebody we work with on jobs. So it's invaluable. I'd say, David, we had all sorts of presentations by users, for our users in that capacity. So I think the presentation quality jumped up last year big time, because we were putting out content that was so relevant to me. And one of the things, so I guess as far as deliverables too, it provided a basis for future best practices and white papers. One of the things we're hoping to do with this is to develop a lot more best practices, and those would be based on how people are actually using this stuff, and not necessarily taking a best practice from the National Institute of Building Sciences, although that might be useful, good place to start. How are people actually using this stuff now? So we're hoping to develop a little more of that. We did one last year. We released a white paper on model location. So how to geographically locate your model. We presented a white paper on that. And that actually was pretty interesting, and that was a result of all of this workflow mapping and stuff. Because what we found out is if the architects up front take the time and work with their civil engineers and their surveyors to locate their models correctly, it really pays big dividends down the road through the whole project through construction, because it makes it easy for design consultants to locate their models, and that information can even be used in the field during construction to locate construction components based on the model geography. So that's one of the things we've published so far. And what else will come out of these workflows? There'll be more best practices, stuff like that. We don't have anything necessarily slated at this point, but we'll have to figure something out. So I think that's about it. And are we there yet? You know, not by a long shot. We're not going to get there for a long time, but hopefully we can at least start to generate a community where we're developing answers by ourselves, for ourselves, that we can actually use, and start to drive the industry in a direction that's helpful for all of us. So that's it for my portion.
We usually average between 30 to 40 people regularly show up for our meetings on an average. Try to keep the topics informative, so it's more, as Chris said, about, you know, users for users. We certainly will bring in some software vendors where it's warranted, where it's needed, applicable. But you know, you think back to what we're working on here. We're looking at the different contract deliverable efforts that go on, and what we see as we go through the workflows, we see a shift in how, you know, there's different places where people are certainly communicating and sharing model information, and a lot of it is dependent, you know, on that. So go back to what I said about internal and external communication. I guarantee you that when you're presenting to, I'll use your firm for example, to an owner, they're not asking you about, you know, your BIM deliverable. They're more concerned about you as a design entity, and this is just a subset, right? Pretty much. And maybe it's your advantage internally that you've adopted this, and so on and so forth. But do you see? I'm not sure. The Williams College project, we can see, how's that delivered? Is that design build?
It is a design build.
Okay, so you obviously had to shift a little bit from this kind of diagram, right?
In fact, most of what we see, and one of the things I was going to say, just I think there's an extreme value in mapping processes like this. And I think this is oftentimes an undervalued or underdone process of mapping, whether it be a production process, a logic process that you might do in your office. It's very important to actually map anything out to see this. And one of the big things that we see is most of our projects now are either a design assist or this type of design build. Very few do we actually see go to build. But as soon as the design team is sort of assembled, whether it be the construction manager is brought on board, it seems like communication is the most important thing that needs to be done up front. And to your point too, oftentimes as a designer, we're traditionally hired by the owner for design ability. There's something unique about us that they wanted for their design challenge, and they hired us to do that. Generally, it's not you were hired because you were the most cost-effective or just because you can stamp the drawings and get it done. Usually, there's some value that we're brought in for, and that's generally what they're after. They always think of the BIM deliverable as sort of a side product. They know they want it. They're not quite sure what they're going to do with it. So we're brought in for that. What we say is that
Did they feel different? Did they feel different about that? Because I'll share with you, I had a conversation with Rita probably 2 years prior to them even putting that project out. And one of the things that she made comment to me was certainly finding anybody in, let's say, Western Massachusetts that could certainly work in that guise and work in kind of a BIM deliverable. So you might have been in the right place at the right time, given your background and prowess when that project became available. So that's why I say, is it part of the conversation where that can be that education to the owner about when they're having this discussion about delivery method, right? Because certain people like higher ed, they typically are going to have their standard methods of contract. But you do get opportunities in the community where they turn to you as a design and construction professionals as to, okay, how can we improve this, and what's really the best way to go? I probably see that more in maybe healthcare than I do in other marketplaces. Is that a fair statement?
It's somewhat fair. I'd say a lot of the clients, what we see now is there's generally an assumption that BIM is going to be done. They're not, and as I said, they're not always sure what they're going to do with it, but they know they're going to ask for it. But they know it is a delivery method by which a model will be turned over at the end instead of, standard drawings.
So it'd be a lot better if they knew what they were going to do with it, wouldn't it?
So they believe, yes, it's going to be much more efficient. We still find that in the end, we believe we're hired for our design ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you say a lot of the expectations about a BIM process isn't so much what they get the that's part of it, but it's a fact, the assumption that the designer and the contractor will be better teaming because they have the same rules.
Lower errors and emissions, and should be lower RFIs, and should be in those sort of scenarios, better communication. But ultimately, we see in the beginning, it's really a communication. Everyone on clear expectations of who's doing what LOD, and how much we're going to be doing it to. Because if they do want more, it needs to be upfront and very clearly specified.
So going back to Dan's statement, though, about, how you got to put the diagram out there. I mean, just so you know, Chris, a lot of input came from a lot of different people. He did all of this, okay? So he's the author. He's the crazy guy. I mean, it's like, but the point is that this becomes, really internal communication to design and construction groups. That's what we're hoping to share that knowledge of what we've been putting forth, and hopefully others, certainly take notice, and we can help one another. Because as I said, if it's going to improve the process, and no matter what your seat at the table is, you're all going to be working together at some point. It's certainly better to work in the best fashion possible that's going to give you, I don't want to say better results, but the opportunity for heightened results. Let's look at it that way, right? So, come on, I know you got questions.
Yeah, wouldn't this chart change based on the size of the project, or other deliverables, I guess?
It wouldn't necessarily. That's pretty applicable to a wide range of projects. If it was like a small renovation, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Did we set that at the beginning? I'm trying to remember. We did something.
Like a mid-size or a mid-size to small hospital.
Yeah, it was like a medical facility that we were looking at.
But a renovation addition, right?
What's that?
Well, I'm just saying, I think when you do renovation addition, there's a lot more upfront in terms of the existing conditions that you could leverage off. And I don't mean, maybe I'm just kind of new, so I can see all the pieces to that, but I think some documentation of that would be kind of like the beginning part.
Sure. I mean, I guess we don't really have like an input of existing documentation.
Right. When it comes to surveying, scanning, and those are the things that you guys iterated on.
Yeah. You said you worked at Danisco Design too, so you've probably done like school renovations?
Yeah, I've done schools, hospitals, nursing homes.
Okay. Yeah, the schools, I've done schools too, and usually what you get is you get old drawings, like usually the schools are built in like the 60s or 70s.
And the drawings aren't accurate.
No, they're not accurate. Surveying information isn't necessarily real. So it's like you're starting new from that point.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess that question, talking about how you can use technology, laser scanning, what's being done in the industry to, you can't rely on drawings, but you can go in and I know there have been a number of companies, I've seen a couple of presentations where they're doing pretty detailed laser scanning of areas and being able to fabricate off-site on a renovation, which is totally, to me, out there in terms of what's going on. But I guess going to the type of project, whether it's a totally new or it's a total renovation or an ad reno, what's different? I guess that would be the question, kind of how that works. And obviously, when you go into different delivery methods, that's a whole other thing about using dynamic models on a construction management or risk delivery method.
You want to try to open up your PDF with
the notes? Well, one of the things, that's an excellent point. What's your name again?
Tom.
And we've got some little guides here that lead to another document of notes. So like this little symbol here stands for, okay, this is an area where we could have some improvement in. And one of the things that came to us in the feedback is LiDAR or laser scanning. So even if it's not a renovation, it'd be great to have a digital model, like a scan of the site even. That would be helpful to start, especially if you're working in the city and stuff. That way if you have a really accurate scan of a site, then you're in better shape to place your building appropriately. So we do have some areas in here, highlighted like what could be better. Another thing down the road for even municipalities would be to have scans not only of the landscape, but what's underneath the landscape. So oftentimes people dig into the ground, and that's when you really find trouble. There's stuff there that nobody knows about. So, ideally it'd be great to build up a library of scans that include subsurface conditions as well. So we do have some notes here as to how to improve the process, and this is also to help make people aware of what's out there too. So maybe a lot of people aren't thinking like that right now.
I was going to say it almost serves as that checklist, and that's one of the things that we see as valuable to any team, whether or not they've been through it, no matter how many times they've been through a process or project process before. At certain stages, it's good to sit back, look at the checklist again. Did I do everything I was supposed to do? Did I, meet the requirements?
Yeah, a lot of, even if you're going through a drawing set, sometimes you'll have a QC checklist or something.
Yeah.
That's a great point. We should
say oftentimes, like our building topology takes about, our average project's like 3.5 years from design to construction. So it becomes one of those, you have a young designer, young architect sometimes, and it's like, wow, it's been 4 or 5 years since I've gone through CA. So it becomes, what do I need to do again? What stage?
That's a good point.
How many times do you upgrade the software while you're dealing with that project?
Yeah, sometimes never.
And I don't know what kind of level of the BIM capabilities all your contractors and subcontractors have, and even your design firms, but this has been a great educational tool too. So say a subcontractor, a mechanical, electrical subcontractor is like, we're not doing a lot of this stuff now. What should we look at doing, and what are other people doing with it? So it's kind of a good way to raise awareness. Like, okay, this is what other people are doing, and this is how it can benefit you down the road. And Mike, as far as owners are concerned too, I think this is a good. It's a very meaty chart to digest in one sitting, but I think at least graphically you can start to show a few things to the owners as to what benefits them. And like one of the things on design bid build, one of the reasons we started with design bid build is in Connecticut, a lot of public work and school work is still done with design bid build, with seeing the risks starting to become more prevalent. So it's still out there a lot where we work. But there's some things that, like you can see here with no design input, even irrespective of BIM, like the design bid build delivery method, we're not getting any kind of design assist, or at least, really substantial design assist from the construction team under this process, which sometimes can hurt you. We've had a job where we did a curtain wall, a pretty complex curtain wall. It was priced one way all the way through design, and then when it got to construction, and the contractor put a cost on it, it blew up the budget. We had to go VE the hell out of the building. That's something that maybe if we had done a non-traditional design assist, not where the person just gives their time away for free, but saying, hey, we're going to pay you to do a design assist, and then later on you're welcome to bid on the project if you want, but we'll pay you for the design work now. So I think introducing non-traditional ways to owners too, to say, hey, we need to help you avoid a difficult design condition if we can hire, a subcontractor first to do design assist. Some other areas that I thought were pretty interesting too is there's a BIM execution plan. It's kind of a small icon here. And this method really highlights the disconnect between the design team and the construction team. So the design team, we don't know who the contractor is. We have a BIM execution plan at the beginning that pretty much just takes care of us.
Right.
And then when the contractor gets on board, he or she has a BIM execution plan just to take care of their stuff. So these two BIM models get pushed along to the end, and then we're kind of joined at the end. And what do we have at the end? We have a real Frankenstein. We have a model at the end. We have design models that aren't fully fleshed out, that may or may not have been kept up. I know Michael keeps his all up, but as you get RFIs and supplemental instructions and all that, are you getting all that stuff back in your model? Not really. I can't say that we are. And then down here we have these fabrication models. In some cases for HVAC, they might have tons of fabrication information to make the ductwork and things. And then what are we going to do with all that at the end? So how does that all get collated? How does that get presented to the owner? I have some thoughts on ways you could present it to an owner, depending on what they want to do with it. But at this point in the profession, we haven't really fleshed it out yet. So
I think your point about, early on, somebody mentioned about, at the end, what is the product? And to be honest with you, we're wrestling with the whole thing of working with owners to really start at the end and say, what do you want to do with this information? Because what the design team uses, how they use BIM for their purpose, and what's in their contract, and the same thing with the builder, what they're using it for and what's in their contract may be different in terms of what the deliverables are, and then how you merge information or work in a dynamic manner on a CM at risk job where multiple models are going back and forth at different times, and it always gets back to who owns the model and who's responsible for what. And I think those are the big picture issues that really need to get flushed out. I know you said you're talking about going with looking at contracts, and I think it really comes down to, from an owner, what are you asking somebody to do? Are you willing to pay them for what you're asking them to do? And are you going to get something at the end that you can actually use and you intend to use versus, I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I know I'm going to want it, so give me whatever you can, which really is not helpful from a design or a construction standpoint. So, I mean, to me, that's it, trying to come up with a process. And that's one of the things we're working with at CMAA is to help owners understand what they're asking for, what's being used, what's the cost of doing it, what's the benefit of it, and trying to understand those things so that when you come together with a design team or a constructor and you're sitting back and looking at how you're going to use this, it's clearer as to what each entity is doing and how they're working together. I know Matt's port's gone really kind of on the
other
extreme, wanting to use the BIM model as a deliverable, and I'm, there's betwixt and between on what that does because contractually, there's a lot of risk involved, and is an owner willing to pay for the entity that you're assigning risk to? And that gets down to the whole issue. So, I mean, it's not something that's going to be resolved quickly, but those are the issues to me. If we don't address those as an industry as a whole, it's going to continue to be, 3 different deliverables for 3 different uses, and it's never going to integrate as well as they could. So
your discussion with the owner is, I think, something that all of us would like to be part of. So let's keep that conversation going. It's very important, but 2 separate stories. I mean, I still see in public entity contracts today where they're asking for the designer or architect to deliver a model that has no use. So then why ask for it, right? So that's kind of the first thing. And I also see quasi-public companies in a design bid build environment asking for LOD 350. So Dan, what's that mean?
I have no idea why
they were riding on the subway one day and they heard somebody talking about it. Oh, we got to put that in the contract. but we laugh about it, but these are real things, and this is that kind of going back to the education of the owners. And some of us have been involved with the BIM community for a while. And I still think we got a lot of work to do, even though we see a lot of advancements and we see certain numbers come out from, the AGC and different people, but we're still a long way away. But these are the kind of conversations we need to engage. Like when you get to that piece with the owner that you're working on for like the FM, it would be great, maybe even at ABX, talk to the people that run that and say, hey, let's invite in some owners to listen to our findings and what we talked about, educate them, get them to come to the table. I think that's a great avenue to do that.
I think we're getting to a point too where we can help educate owners, at least from our perspective. I don't want to tell the owner how to do their job because they know it much better than I, but I think we can at least...
Not necessarily. You're the owner. I've heard people say the owner's always right, and I've been in
plenty of other businesses.
They may be paying the bills, and they have to deal with the issues at the end, but if they know what's right, then why do they need all the other?
Yeah, no, good point. But what I was going to say is just that I think we're at a point now where, based on information like this, we can start to educate them a little more. Right. If we just ask them what they want, they'll be like, I want a great building under budget on time, and then I want it to run seamlessly after everybody moves in. So they don't, when it comes to this stuff, they don't know exactly what they want. So I think we can talk to them and present them with some information. Similarly, like if you have a client who hasn't used architects much, you might have gone through the process of trying to educate them how to work with an architect or a design team. Similarly, I think we can do that. We can educate them on how to work with BIM models. You know, for example, if they, so like the state of Massachusetts requires a BIM model. The most likely thing they're going to do with it is give the BIM model to the next person to do the renovation of. In that case, we could say, hey, let's just give you the design models. You know, we'll package them up prettily, and you know, so that you can give them to the next architect.
But what happens if the model is not updated with as-built information?
Well, that's something you can address.
Who's validating that?
Depends what the contract is.
Right, right, and that's really what the conversation was.
That's right. That's right.
We have a conversation about owners as well, right? How many tools are actually available to leverage a lot of the information that's provided in these models to owners? Right, and that becomes the biggest hurdle. They need the tools that fit their needs. And once we reach that point, now we can add what would be an execution plan across the project with the appropriate LODs per parties, and really allow this evolution to progress. So that's one of the hurdles, and then it's going to also force you know, to have the applicable people on this staff to really have a logical conversation.
Yeah, you hear us talking about this, you should listen to people like at IFMA, right? And listen to the challenges that they have, you know, and I don't want to pick on you.
No,
so let's look at Williams College. Do they have somebody there, you turn this all over, that's going to have an understanding of how to utilize a model and get through the model? I'm not hypothetical.
I had an example recently of a university that will remain unnamed, Cambridge, been around for about 400 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And their building archivist called me and was asking about BIM consultants because they wanted someone so that their staff could learn the application that they were receiving all the drawings in. And I was like, what do you guys intend to do? And it was like, oh, so we can open and see the models and stuff. And I was like, to do what? Like, what are you intending to do? And I was like, you just learn, you navigate around, print or something? And it was no. And I was like, well, there really is no need for you to do that. You have them, but really for no other purpose than to maybe pass it on. But
it's not different than what they did with CAD files and regular paper.
Yeah, it goes to that point of like, yeah, what are you expecting to do with this? You know, it's like they really don't have any idea yet what they intend to do, and that's why I think it's up front of that communication of what it is at the end that we're going to deliver. And it would be great to actually get some owners in here because
right up here too.
If we answer or find out from owners what are their top pain points with a particular building, it's probably the operating and maintenance, energy is probably the number one, the life cycle, and what's the routine things that are biggest pain points. How can our models possibly assist with those? And it may not necessarily be the models, but it might be the materials that make up the building, the construction materials, what's going to be easier to maintain the floors, the walls, you know, especially in like student environments where it might get excess damage or wear, hospital environments that are constantly changing. So find out and have the conversation with the owners to find out what their particular pain points are and how can we best design to improve those.
And then there's derivatives even come from that conversation when you talk about asset management and all that other stuff. That's almost like a side benefit.
Side benefit.
That's what it is, you know, so yeah.
On the flip side, Boston College, I'm working with them on CA and their new rec center, and us in Skanska, they actually want their BIM model so that they can bring it into Autodesk building ops, I think. And then they're going to have basically a QR code on every piece of everything in that building. And they're going to go up there and they're going to scan using their iPads or their iPhones. And they're going to come up with a cut sheet of that, whatever that, you know, whatever it is. And then they're going to be able to locate it in the building if they're remote. And so they're actually, I found, pretty interested in using the whole 3D model, not necessarily within Revit or Navisworks or whatever, but within this kind of Autodesk building ops and, you know, Autodesk.
Yeah, we've had that discussion when I was up here, whenever the last year, talking about kind of the FM side of things. And really there's like 4 different environments, and you're talking about, you know, one of them. And that's, I think, as an industry, we need to identify, as you're saying, what are the owner's needs? And there's a commonality, but at the end of the day, they are all a bit different. You don't necessarily need to give them everything. That's part of that discovery session. At the beginning, you sit down and say, okay, what if we were to reverse engineer this, and we give you a building, what things do you need, you know, in that, and what can we do to make that happen? And you'll find different people have different answers. I find, in that kind of conversation, who wants to hear that stuff? The CFO, right? Whoever's in charge of the money is going to want to know, what those assets are. And, oh, wow, we have a way to tie that to, our ALM system so that we can now, figure out from cost analysis and life cycle what it is. I mean, that's phenomenal. So that's the selling point. See, that's kind of that, what are you describing to the owner when you're sitting in front of them? I think that there's certain people across the country that have been doing a pretty good job of that, and it's almost an unfair advantage. Some of the larger construction companies, the design firms, they have that in their speak.
David, that's actually what I appreciate about a map like this, because I would only assume that when you started this process, you said, let's map something, and it'll be the end-all and be-all of all process, right? But you started from the beginning,
Never is.
right, and then go to the end. But it's great when you're finished with something like this, because you can start at the end and do sort of a pull plan all the way back and say, what is it you're looking for? And this might look a little different if the owner wants some different deliverables and all these kind of touch points are going to happen at different times. Is this like a live document? Is this
Lucid Chart is a web-based application, so it lives on. I have access to it.
And can you make it like save as for a project and then make changes to it?
No, all you can do is I can share it with other people online, and they can make changes to it through web browser.
But if you change it, it changes it in one place. It's always that one living document.
Yeah, you'd have to save it off as something else if you want.
Yeah, and then you make your own. Yeah.
It's like a web-based version of Visio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's really intuitive and easy to use. That's why I used it.
So just a quick critique is that we're talking about conventions and the kind of deliverables that we do for drawings, and contractors see the conventions when the designer puts on paper or whatever and then builds it. So the conventions for something like this is that you have to know, what this parallelogram means versus the rectangle.
Yeah, we do have a small graphic legend up there.
Yeah, and that's helpful. But when communicating this to whatever audience it is, let's say it's the owner, and they look at it at first, and when I first looked at it, I'm sure everybody just said, "Wow, it's impressive," and then, "Wow, I'm overwhelmed," and then, "Wow, I'm going to need a few hours to walk through all this." And then as you're sitting with it, you're like, okay, I'm starting to get it, and I see what these links mean, and I know that this is going to bring us to a document and all that. It feels like, that I can be comfortable with this tool. As a critique, I would say for the first time, maybe kind of spoon feeding, if it's somebody for the first time, a quick graphic of how to maybe just show kind of one swim lane, like walk through with the owner and say, this is what you'll do, and then kind of open up the curtain and say, this is what happens behind the scenes, and how they all interact. Maybe it's a series of smaller, the pamphlet versus the novel type of thing that all connect to each other. It's a way of just getting, I'm just thinking about it because I'd love to use this, either in a BEP or with a discussion with an owner, but maybe it's a part of a larger conversation of other graphics that help them, and then at some point we're using this as a tool. Is anybody getting the same kind of?
I think so, because sometimes when you have a diagram like this, you have Prezi as a design or as a presentation tool, or Microsoft Sway, where you could be in the upper left-hand corner where you start off your story, and then you almost walk through the journey of different points. But I also think it's a bit of a living document. That every project's going to be unique, every requirement could be unique, and you have different requirements that now pop in here, and now change the document as you go. But, yeah, almost like that Prezi or approach where you can zoom in on different areas and just reveal one panel as you need to as you sort of develop the story.
No, I think you could repurpose it for different audiences. Definitely. I mean, we just haven't gotten there yet. So
I think it'd be a great attachment to the BIM execution plan to talk about process. I mean, you talked about deliverables and things, but to understand the process, I think it'd be good to include that in describing that process and how people, your firms and entities interact with each other in that process, and ultimately what the deliverables are.
Do you think this kind of presentation at ABX would be helpful?
Absolutely.
So I was going to say, he's going to be up in Boston a lot more starting next week. Because he's starting a new job with a design firm up here.
Right.
So he's going to be, he'll be coming to more of your meetings.
I have a suggestion as well.
Anybody has any, we're open to constructive criticism.
So presenting,
Constructive.
presenting at ABX as well as other trade shows that are more geared towards the owners, because it's coming out of this, it really sounds like, in addition to the education and outreach part that at least for me, kind of was focused more on the designers and students coming out of school and stuff like that here, it sounds like there's also a real need for educating the owners, because it's almost like your description is beginning with the software providers who, here are the tools, now you figure out what to do with it. It's almost like the architects are doing the same thing, like here are the tools, owners, but we're not going to, but they need a little more guidance on what to do with it.
Well, especially up front when they're making a decision on what software. You want to be able to see it. That is a big transition for them from going from something 2D to, yeah, we're concerned about this. Yeah, very. And so, I mean, whatever tool you decide, it may be different for a firm, but this is, they need to see this. This is very nice work.
And maybe like from the BIM roundtable, in addition to like the sharing the knowledge that we, like there's a lot of the discussions of how do we get the knowledge out to the design industry around here. We could also start tapping into things like ISMA and FOMA to get the knowledge out to the end users. So,
yeah, that's another thing why I love this too, because it's a group coming together in Connecticut saying, we all formed this document, and now to go to FMO or somebody else and say, you know, what do you think? Because you're a group of industry professionals too, so then you can start to talk on that same level. And that's what I hope for the BIM Roundtable too, is to have some of these deliverables where you can start to, instead of just pointing to articles that are out there, say, this is our collective intelligence that we want to share with you, have a conversation with. Curious too, in your BIM execution plans currently, do you reference things like this, either from Penn State or ones that you've made on your own? Could this replace that, or work with those documents?
We've actually found something very unique with a lot of our BIM execution plans. A lot of our clients, we do deal with some very sophisticated clients and sometimes less sophisticated clients. For the most part, most are hesitant and or scared by a heavily detailed BIM execution plan. And that we end up doing a light version that just does a light version of LOD, and that's what we find for the most part, is that is the predominant BIM execution plan that most of our projects end up using.
And what is the reason behind that?
Most of them are actually scared to do anything. They're very unaware of what BIM means, and they don't know what it is, and they don't see the benefit or are scared off of doing something very detailed. They don't know what the benefit or gain is going to be. And I think it's ultimately, in the end, even though they know to ask for a model, they have no idea what they're going to do with it.
Our feedback has been that just a more detailed BIM execution plan, owners feel that it drives up the cost. You're doing a lot of extra modeling and extra work. Then they hear, well, the contractors are saying they can't use what you make, so why are you making it? Why are we spending all this extra time and money?
I would also think that if you have a very detailed execution plan, you limit the ability to perform. It may be too detailed. It almost locks you in to working in a certain way when the team may come up with some creative solutions on how to exchange information.
I mean, actually, one thing we always do say sort of cripples the team in the beginning is trying to be too detailed.
Right.
And we see it oftentimes with again, I go look back at like young designers where they're often at this point of like, hey, let's model this in like the material, the contrast of the wall, and all the materials, and it's like, no, we just want a wall. Just want a wall. We don't care. Just make it a wall. Just make it a window. Make it a door. All of that will come together later on. That does actually cause design.
It's the LOD, right? Right. At least the intent of the process is just put it in there and then make it smarter and where you have to.
Refine it later on when you're ready.
Right.
Or even, what, sometimes we may even make it in the model. It might just be in the specifications. It says what it is.
Yeah, to be honest, our BIM execution plan is really to hold our consultants to a certain level, an LOD.
Right.
Right? It's more beneficial for us in that type of contractual way than it is back towards the owner.
We've had clients that really the only other detail they wanted was the equipment, the furnishing. That's really all we care about, and actually the subcontractor HVAC is going to give us mechanical units. They know the operating and life cycle and maintenance on those, and now they know what their furniture and fixed assets are. That's the most important thing to one particular client.
I could see a possible use of this if you were to start a project team and say, this is an example, made by a certain group of a certain project type, showing the sort of schematic behind the scenes. This is like when you open up an owner's, you buy a product, an appliance or something, right? You can see how to wire it all. You don't really need to know. You just need to know that it works and that somebody's figured out the wiring. And you look at the getting started page, give me the 5 steps to get started. So you could say that eventually we'll have a schematic like this. We're building an appliance together, and then say, let's talk about sort of a checklist type of thing. Let's talk about these things and build it together, not with this in front of you, just kind of a quick shot. Build it over here with like Post-it notes and discussion and all that to the point of getting to something like this. Then you have your own schematic in the end, and it's not, this looks so wrong because I feel like, where do I fit in and where do I move left and right and all this? But if we're doing it together and forming this, then we'll all feel like we have some ownership of this. I mean, much like I would assume your group feels like, because you all had input.
It's not a how-to. It's a snapshot.
Yeah.
This is how we work together now. Yeah.
Right. It's also very educational for those who are not in the
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
On a construction perspective, understand the design and the owner and the building departments. You have all those different swim lanes, and like we just talked about, we tend to be so focused on our own lane, we don't really care what's going on outside of those dividers, and that we find that process that works for us. But at the end of the day, the owner gets the collection of everyone's efforts, right? So there's times when one swim lane is doing something that's best for them and not so much for the other member of that team and vice versa. So sitting down as a group, reviewing the content of each swim lane, let's say, allows everyone to say, well, maybe if I spend a minute here or 2 minutes here, which is really counterintuitive to what I've normally done, may actually benefit the entire project in the long run and really benefit the owner. That's what they're collecting, some of that process, so that works.
I think that's key too, because sometimes on projects there can be, not necessarily animosity, but just the unknown. So you're not going to feel like helping a contractor if you're on the design side necessarily. You're feeling like you have to take care of your own stuff. But maybe something like this can help you kind of psychologically bridge that divide and say, hey, regardless of who's going to be doing this, if I just do these few things to my model, maybe it'll help somebody on the contractor or subcontractor side. So, yeah, to your point, knowing what's going on outside of your lane, I think is.
This also helps explain fees and like, why is the architect asking for this amount of billing? Well, they're doing all this work at this point, and this is why the construction manager is doing this, or this. It helps explain where the money, what am I getting for my money? Where is my money going?
I'm kind of curious, as we've gone through this, and we talk about the owner a lot, if there's OPMs out there that have something similar in the background when they're trying to kind of herd the cats of a project. Does anybody run across that? Anybody? Because we can maybe learn, owners can learn from that as well.
There are a couple places that have put out BIM owners guides. I don't know if anybody has seen those, like National Institute of Building.
Yeah, that came out recently, and
there was another one too. So there's a couple places that are publishing stuff, and they're quite wonky, very verbose.
Yeah, the NIBS one is almost really like a.
The NIBS one is interesting.
It's interesting, but it's more of a glossary, a definition.
Yeah, the NIBS one creates a role that I hadn't heard of before, which is the owner's BIM manager. So I guess it's a job creator.
Well, yeah, you'd be surprised.
So in addition to having, say, like a contractor with the BIM execution plan, a design team with BIM execution plan, now the owner may have an owner BIM manager who can oversee all of that, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in practice yet, but that's what this is promoting.
STV in doing LaGuardia out of their New York office lost one of their BIM managers because Denver International needed to hire a specific person to run everything for them. So that's not at that level, not unusual to start seeing that kind of request now from owners that are, I'll say, in the know.
It's like Massport.
Yeah, Massport's right there too. I would call them the same thing too. Yeah.
That makes sense in what we do, right? We all have our own BIM managers. Right. So we would expect them to. How does that work, right?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'm still thinking about is there's a comment earlier about the BIM model that's designed is in many instances thrown away and things are started from scratch. And I guess I'll just use that.
At least in this process.
Well, yeah. No, but
no, that's true.
But it
It's
really
true.
gets
A lot of
down to
process.
the issue is then why do any of it in design if that isn't going to be part of a deliverable? And if it's used to help think through the design, work through the design, get a better design, come up with whatever. But if the real model that's going to be used in the construction of it is not generated in the design process, or a piece of the design is not used as the foundation for the actual BIM model that's going to be used to build it, to me that's problematic. You know, if I look at it from an owner's standpoint, then I'm asking for something to happen, and why am I asking, or why do I want it? And same thing, then the same thing with the pass off at the end of the job from the builder to the owner. If I'm only going to use it for equipment and FF&E information, that's a much different process. So
in the end, they probably just need spreadsheets.
It's what database, again, that's what we're looking at, something. What needs to be put in, from an owner's perspective, what needs to get put in the model versus can be put into database that actually is a better use for having information at the end that maybe you can use 2 or 3 different types of facility management software, because you're not, gearing it toward one specific thing, you're getting more general information. So
this goes to what Bill said at the very beginning of the meeting when you said you'd like to get past modeling like crazy for 2D documents.
Yeah.
Because this is where it all breaks down, is like, we're modeling like crazy, and at the end of the day, our contractually obligated deliverable is a set of printed drawings. And then we even go so far, so I'd say like industry-wide, we're kind of hung up on these paper documents.
Right.
We even go so far as when we get, at this stage, when we give our BIM models to the contractors, we have them sign a disclaimer, a waiver, say, hey, you can use this, but at your own risk. We're not saying.
Coordination.
Yeah. Doesn't mean anything. Don't trust anything in it.
So that's a huge, huge hurdle. You know, when we get to the point where the model can be used for construction.
There's 2 issues in this conversation. One, in regards to the document, it's really long, right? At that point, nobody wants to be precedents, right? You're known forever. Maybe not in the right way. Right? So that's part of one of the concerns that we talk about with using a model as a construction document in that sense. But going back to your point, I think the flip side of this is really not to, my background's in IT, so part of the issue is with IT in itself. Interoperability of file types. How do they all make their money in a sense? A lot of it is based on proprietary their file types, the collection of that information, what's unique to what they do, and they've been able to lock that key into 3 letters at the end of a file, right? And that it plays a huge factor in what we're talking about, because you get a file that comes from a designer in a certain file type, which is design, Revit, or I don't want to use brand name, industry names, but authoring tool. An authoring tool is designed for that type of purpose. It doesn't have the functionality that some other tools are designed for in LOD 350%. So now we get into the meat and potatoes of the issue, right, which is that whole piece. It's not just the geometry, it's the data, which is another important piece. How do you get everyone to be happy, gelled in the same piece? And it really comes down to tools being able to leverage that information, but also those companies, maybe they need to work together just as we do to allow that information to progress from one file type to the other.
So now I'll segue to yes, we as a user population come together and say this is what we need from software developers and from everybody to come around these big ideas, because it sounds like we have a lot of concerns, a lot of issues as firms, as contractor, designers, engineers. We want to work better together, and there's tons of voices. So the more we can kind of pool those voices in an industry group, I think, pulling it back to what you've done, we're going to be heard a little bit more too. So just as another kind of goal, and I just want to show you my watch.
I thought you were trying to do the EDE thing. EDE. Flavor.
There you go. Wow. That's pretty cool.
We are approaching time or overtime, but feel free to stick around until they throw us out of here. And Dave and Chris came all the way from Connecticut, so I'm sure they don't want to leave right away. So ask for more questions.
it'd be nice to see like expected time frames. You know, depending on the size of the project, you know, so it even gets more detailed, like in sliding scale, like for the size of the project, what's the expected time frame for this particular area? You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I mean, if we're improving on this and driving to like that perfect flow, it's like, what are the expected time frames? It helps with budgeting and all that, but, I mean, it's going to make it more complicated, but, you know, I think,
We're not getting to
yeah, you know, I mean, it already looks like a timeline right now, but like, what are the expected time frames for that, you know? I mean, everything looks like it's the same, but if we're creating that perfect visual, it should be, you know,
that's what I like visual versus perfect. Whenever it's perfect. And yeah, it's not going to affect the workflow, but it's got to be the same for every project. But I like it just as a document to say, this is it.
Sure.
Yeah, this phrase, whatever, making your own. And sometimes it's less expanding, it's more contracting, right? And then what has to happen?
And, you know, from an owner's perspective, what's costing us the most money? What's where we're saving money? And really what it is fun. It's billable out. So, this is my 2 cents.
It'd be cool if you could integrate it with the level of detail, like each page, you know, like fabrication obviously is a heavier, you know, like level of detail. It's like, if you, that's why you think contractors more like on board at the beginning now. For like major clients, big clients, they want their contractor on board early on because of fabrication and cost benefit. To alleviate some of the design pain of wasting the design model, because we're not fabricators, we're designers.